noticed a little extra pomp and circumstance this morning, it's not really because I am back from study leave. It is because this morning we are hosting a very special chalice. It is the General Assembly chalice. General Assembly is the annual gathering of the Unitarian Universalist Association and representatives from UU congregations all over the country. Usually we have to travel quite far to get to GA. You've heard me talk about my experience in Phoenix, Arizona 2 years ago. But this year, in June, General Assembly is quite close by in Providence, Rhode Island. And I hope many of you will join me there. This chalice has traveled many miles. Each year it travels around the host district for the next GA, bringing a call to General Assembly to its congregations. And I want to thank Don Walnut from the Blue Channing District Board for toting it around our district. Thank you so much, Don. Please stand. She's shy. She'll wave. Thank you. The artist who made this chalice, Mordecai Roth, was a dedicated Unitarian Universalist from Arizona. He was both a decorated World War II veteran and a committed peace activist. A retired dentist, he designed his first chalice when a member of his congregation asked him to make a memorial to her daughter. A request from another congregation inspired him to create this Tree of Life design. That began a retirement career of over 130 chalices, and his designs now grace congregations all around the country. In 2012, at the age of 92, Roth lit this chalice for Justice GA in Phoenix. He died last spring, and we honor his memory and the gift that he has given to us.
As we light the flame in this Tree of Life chalice, which has been before 11 General Assemblies, may we see in our mind's eye the thousands of people who came together each year to celebrate our faith. May we feel the energy and excitement. May we sense a connection through this lighting today by its creator, Mordecai Roth, who loved and lived out our Unitarian Universalist faith. And with that, be inspired to join with others in our grand assembly this June in Providence.
Our opening words. Enter, rejoice, and come in. Come into this space of holiness and mystery. Come into this space of beloved memory. Come into this space of hope and conviction. Steeped in our connection to our larger faith, strengthened by those sitting right next to us, and inspired by those who have filled this space before us. We join in song and story, prayer and silence. We join together to celebrate this mysterious journey with one another. Come, let us worship together. One thing I love about church is that it gives us the opportunity to do some redos in our life. And this past weekend, Brenda and I were part of a wonderful Martin Luther King celebration, and it was a joyous event. And we were meant to lead a song at the end, We Shall Overcome, and there was a little snafu in the lineup, and we didn't get to do that. We had, we even orchestrated some hand coordination, yeah. So we really want to do it. So humorous, we would like to do this with you. So please join us. Don't bother looking at your hymnals. Brenda's going to lead us and do as we do with our hands. If you will stand for We Shall Overcome. of prayer and meditation. After our spoken prayer and a time of silent meditation, we will sing together Spirit of Life, which is printed in your order of service. Let us huddle together this morning, our community a place of warmth in our lives, as we share the flame of hope and connection. Let us allow the frost of isolation and bitterness to melt away as we open ourselves to a sense of peace and spirit. We extend our thoughts to all those who are cold this morning, lacking shelter or love to keep them warm. Let us wrap our prayers around them and each other like scarves, and wish each other safe journeys through the storm. May we be insulated from fear as the earth is insulated by the snow, and like bulbs, may we continue to grow and open inside, despite the cold, ready for the spring to stretch and grow toward justice. Amen. Our reading this morning is by one of my favorite poets, Billy Collins, entitled Shoveling Snow with Buddha. In the usual iconography of the temple or the local walk, you would never see him doing such a thing, tossing the dry snow over a mountain of his bare, round shoulder, his hair tied in a knot, a model of concentration. Sitting is more his speed, if that is the word for what he does or does not do. Even the season is wrong for him. In all his manifestations, is it not warm or slightly humid? Is this not implied by his serene expression, that smile so wide it wraps itself around the waist of the universe? But here we are, working our way down the driveway, one shovelful at a time. We toss the light powder into the clear air. We feel the cold mist on our faces. And with every heave, we disappear and become lost to each other in these sudden clouds of our own making, these fountain bursts of snow. This is so much better than a sermon in church, I say out loud. But Buddha keeps on shoveling. This is the true religion, the religion of snow and sunlight and winter geese barking in the sky, I say. But he is too busy to hear me. He has thrown himself into shoveling snow as if it were the purpose of existence, as if the sign of a perfect life were a clear driveway you could back the car down easily and drive off into the vanities of the world with a broken heater fan and a song on the radio. All morning we work side by side, me with my commentary and he inside his generous pocket of silence, until the hour is nearly noon and the snow is piled high all around us. Then I hear him speak. After this, he asks, can we go inside and play cards? Certainly, I reply, and I will heat some milk and bring cups of hot chocolate to the table while you shuffle the deck and our boots stand dripping by the door. Ah, says the Buddha, lifting his eyes and leaning for a moment on his shovel before he drives the thin blade again deep into the glittering white snow. On my first day back in the office after study leave, I was listening to one of my radio gurus, Callie Crossley, on my drive-in from Wellfleet, and she made a reference to the Roman god Janus. In ancient Roman religion and myth, Janus is the god of beginnings, transitions, and endings, and also of gates, doors, and passages. Of course, I am drawn to the God of doorways, right? You already know about my doorway obsession. Now I have a God for it. Janus is usually depicted as having two faces, since he looks both to the future and to the past. The Romans named the month of January in his honor, and this seems fitting, since January has become a time for us to look back on the old year and forward at the new year simultaneously. One thing that Callie mentioned about Janus struck me. To look both forward and backward, she said, Janus must stand still. January is a good time for us to stand still, to gain some perspective on the year behind us and take stock of the year in front of us, to make resolutions and to plant the seeds of future dreams. We all need some downtime this winter, to look both backward and forward, to fully ground ourselves in the present, to grab hold of the doorframe and stand there for a while between what has been and what will be. By the way, I laughed out loud when I was halfway through writing this sermon and I learned that the winter storm that we were hit by this week was called Winter Storm Janus. Maybe nature is sending us a message. Stay inside, she says. Sit still for a while. Look backwards and forwards. I enjoyed some of that stillness at the beginning of January, and as promised, I return with gems of wisdom and inspiration from the northern woods, where I unwisely booked my study leave this year. Next year, I assure you, I will choose someplace warm. But I had good company on my journey, including Lisa, and a stack of books that has been patiently waiting for me. And because I'm a Gen Xer, my gathered wisdom also comes from YouTube, Upworthy, and Facebook, as well as some incredible TED Talks. If you don't know what I'm talking about, ask me later. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, have no fear, because some old school means of communication are still really effective too. I also share with you this morning insight gathered from the wayside pulpit of the Baptist church around the corner from our inn in New Hampshire, where a big old sign in the yard said, "Your words are a window to your soul." This made me stop and think each and every time we drove past it. I will likely preach from all these sources again, one at a time, but I promised you a best of from my study leave. And so here goes, some wisdom distilled from each source. Anne Lamott's latest book is called Stitches, a handbook on meaning, hope, and repair. And this was the first book I reached for. We live stitch by stitch, is Annie's claim. And we cannot avoid the rending and tearing that life's experiences cause our bit of cloth. Sometimes we look at the shreds before us and think, how can I rebuild a life out of this? Too much has been lost. But the secret of life, says Annie, is to patch, patch, patch. Thread your needle, she says. Make a knot. Find one place on the other piece of torn cloth where you can make one stitch that will hold. And do it again and again and again. Annie says she's always loved funky, rustic quilts more than elegant and maybe lovelier ones. She says you see the beauty of homeliness and rough patches in how they defy expectations of order and comfort. They are improvised, like jazz, where one thing leads to another without any idea of exactly where the route will lead. Reading this, I was reminded of going to see the Quilts of Gee's Bend exhibit at the Museum of Fine Art in Boston years ago. The quilts of Gee's Bend were created by a group of women who lived in the isolated African-American hamlet of Gee's Bend, Alabama. The quilts weren't what I expected quilts in a museum to be. I think I was expecting something a little more Amish, orderly and symmetrical with complex designs somehow still made by hand. But the quilts of Gee's Bend were not like that. They were like jazz. The curator of the exhibit wrote, "There's a brilliant improvisational range of approaches to composition that is more often associated with the inventiveness and power of abstract painters than it is with textile making." But the quilts of Gee's Bend were not simply pieces of abstract art influenced by African textiles. They were also practical. They were pieced together from what was available. They were made to keep the quilters and their children warm in unheated shacks that lacked running water, telephones, and electricity. And you know, if one of those quilts got a hole in it, it would not be given up on. No, it would not be thrown away. It would be patched, patched, patched. Their makers knew about a life lived stitch by stitch. After stitches, I turned to poetry, to the book Evidence by Mary Oliver. From that treasury, I choose to share with you the poem, It Was Early. It was early, which has always been my hour to begin looking at the world, and of course, even in the darkness, to begin listening to it, especially under the pines where the owl lives and sometimes calls out as I walk by, as he did on this morning. So many gifts. What do they mean? In the marshes where the pink light was just arriving, the mink with his bristle tail was stalking the soft-eared mice. And in the pines, the cones were heavy, each one ordained to open. Sometimes I need only to stand wherever I am to be blessed. Little mink, let me watch you. Little mice, run and run. Dear pine cone, let me hold you as you open. So good. And of course, we are those pine cones, each of us ordained to open. And can I please hold on to that invitation to stand wherever I am, to be blessed? Oh, it's hard to move on from Mary Oliver, but I must. There are other books to get through. I turned next to a book that has been on my list for quite some time, written by one of my more famous colleagues in the last year of his life, after being given a terminal prognosis of cancer. It's called Love and Death, My Journey Through the Valley of the Shadow. You see why it's taken me so long to read it. I just didn't want to, even though I knew it would be good. And it was good. And not too sad in the end, because Forest Church had done a lot of mending in the years leading up to his terminal illness. And so he entered his dying with a certain wholeness that gave him great peace. He was able to experience the gift of his last year and months and days. He did not spend a lot of time in anger or denial or fighting the inevitable. He stood where he was in the valley of the shadow of death, to be blessed. Reverend Church defines religion as our human response to the dual reality of being alive and having to die. And the goal of life, he says, is to live in such a way that our lives will prove worth dying for. His other main point in the book is this: the one thing that can't be taken from us, even by death, is the love we give away before we go. I promised to share from an online source, and here it is, a TED Talk on gratitude by Louis Schwartzberg, a photographer and filmmaker. He starts by talking a little about his photography. He started when you had to ship your film through the mail and got it back a week later. And he has patience in another way. He specializes in time-lapse photography. And he shows some of it on the big screen behind him as he talks. The flowers behind him open and close, open and close. He calls it a dance, and it is. You see a strawberry ripen before your eyes. It's magical. Then he talks about a project he's working on which interviews a young girl and an old man. The old man is a Benedictine monk, Brother David Stendel-Rost. I'll post this video on our Facebook page, but right now I want to quote the old man. Set to a video montage of Louis' beautiful time-lapse photography, flowers opening and closing, the sun rising and setting, shadows passing. Brother David says this: "You think this is just another day in your life. It's not just another day. It's the one day that is given to you. Today, it's given to you. It's a gift. It's the only gift that you have right now, and the only appropriate response is gratefulness. If you do nothing else but to cultivate that response to the great gift that is this unique day, if you learn to respond as if it were the first day in your life and the very last day, then you will have spent this day very well." Lorraine, I hope you don't mind if I conclude with your words. A poem I was particularly drawn to in my reading of Coffee at Hildy's. Winter. Sometime this winter, when weather beats like a drunken sailor on a closed door, when snow flies sideways, biting and swallowing your breath, find your way to the sea. Stand as best you can at water's edge and watch waves like speeding ships hell-bent on cascading to the shore. Hear the howl and rage of the wind, and for a few brief moments, put your face to the onslaught and drink it in. Here's what I learned on study leave. Live life stitch by stitch. When hard times come, patch, patch, patch. Stand wherever you are to be blessed. Strive to live a life that is worth dying for. Welcome today as a gift. Put your face to the onslaught and drink it in. Amen, and blessed be.